In this video, I'm going to be talking to an expert on the PSI AVAA, or Active Velocity Acoustic Absorber boxes, which are in essence bass traps absorbing frequencies from 15 to 160 hertz. These don't need any calibration or any setup time. They have a microphone built in and they simply respond to the frequencies in your room. Before we get into the video, I want to dive into the computer and show you exactly what the problem is in this room. So as you can see on screen, the decay time from 50 hertz and above is very good. It's very controlled. This is pre-Trinnov, so there's a few peaks and dips in the frequency response. But below 200 milliseconds across the frequency response is a very good result. It's quite a dry room as a short decay time. However, as you can see, there's a huge problem at 40 hertz where that resonance lasts over a second. It's going off the top of the chart here. What this is doing is muddying up and masking and smearing the low end, but also all the octaves above, extending into the mid-range and the top end. This is affecting the phantom center and the stereo imaging and the overall intelligibility of the mix coming out of the speakers. Now, the speakers have been optimized in terms of position, and the room acoustics have been optimized to flatten the frequency response as much as possible. Trinnov is also flattening the frequency response, but Trinnov can't remove decay time. Trinnov can lower the SPL at certain frequencies, i.e. 40 hertz, so we're not activating the room as much, but the room is still going to resonate, and Trinnov can't alter physics to that extent. So we are still getting this huge decay at 40 hertz. Let's dive into the interview, and a little bit later I'm going to show you the results that we got with the AVAA C214 boxes, because it is impressive. Hey guys, welcome to another part of me exploring this concept of having a mixing and mastering studio in my spare room. And today I have a guest. This is Paul Mortimer from Emerging UK, who distribute PSI Trinnov and the PSI AVAA, what do you call them?
Bass traps.
Bass traps, okay. Today we're going to pick Paul's brains about what these are and how they work, and then we're going to show you guys how they worked in my room, because they delivered some quite interesting results, didn't they?
They certainly did.
All I can say straight away is audibly, it's incredible what they do. Firstly, tell everyone what it is exactly they're doing,
okay,
for those of you who don't know them.
Yeah, so low frequency energy in the room, the speakers are generating frequencies below 200. It's very difficult to try to trap that energy. That energy is trying to escape from the room because we're in a closed space, and also the more solid the walls are, if they're solid brick, then that's energy that's trying to escape. It can't escape, so it's then typically going into the corners, and you get what are known as standing waves. Those standing waves then bounce back, and because they're coming from all angles, floor, ceiling, walls, then you end up also with null points. So you end up with all this low frequency vibrating on the outside of the wall, causing then cancelling the middle. What the AVAs do is they are a diaphragm with two bass drivers inverted and a microphone, and the microphone is detecting the energy and then vibrating the drivers, which are then absorbing that energy as it comes. So it's when you get a traditional passive bass trap, the wavelength of the very low frequencies, let's take something like a 40 or 30 hertz, has a very, very long wavelength. To actually absorb and diffuse that, you have to have a bass trap that's about a quarter of the wavelength, which would mean having something like a 2 to 3 meter deep bass trap in this room. There is a way of doing passive tuned bass traps, but they are only working at one specific frequency, and every corner in this room will have a number of frequencies that are building up in that space, so you can't just have one bass trap. The benefit of the AVA is that it's dealing with all frequencies from 150 down to 15 hertz. And it is, that membrane is basically moving backwards and forwards, which is dispersing that low frequency energy. With the C214s, we have the ability to remotely adjust their sensitivity, and the earlier model, the C20, which is still available, if you imagine that has a sensitivity of say -40 to 0, the C214 can actually go up to +6, so it can be extra sensitive. They can then be tuned to each corner in the sense of how much, if you overdo the sensitivity, then you can start to cause feedback or a slight resonance. So you can then just back them off. then the key important thing is where you put them. So just putting one in the middle of the room is not going to do anything. People often think that it just going to sucks the bass out, and it doesn't. In a similar way to passive bass traps, you still need to put them in the actual space where the bass builds up. So a simple listening test, either by playing sine waves, we did a little bit of playing around earlier, or even just a kick drum, something that's generating low frequency energy, and use your ears, walk around, stick your head in the corners, both up and down. We were playing around earlier with listening sort of quite high up. Get down on your knees, actually listen, and you want to find at various different low frequency sine waves, you can find the area that is most commonly an area where the bass is building up, and that's where you need to put one. There's no calibrating or anything to do with it. You simply put them in, you set them to the highest threshold that they can, sensitivity threshold that they can bear. Often when you get very reflective corners, if you've got very hard surfaces, they can slightly feed back on themselves, so then you just nudge them back a notch. So you're going to go too far, pull them back. That's all you need to do. Then they just simply turn on and off every day. Where they go doesn't necessarily, people often think that everything has to be kind of match pairs in stereo. Often it is, the front pair can often be, but in many rooms they're not symmetrical, and it definitely wasn't in here. You know, it was everything about your right hand side, both front and back, that was the worst offender, which is interesting because the two most solid walls are actually on the opposite side.
Yep.
Don't know why. We definitely found a lot of problems at the back, and we found that it was actually a height thing as well. So kind of getting one AVA further up definitely helped. We could definitely hear the difference with them in and out, and it really reduced the resonating, and then improved the null point a certain amount at the mix position.
Yeah, the null in this room is weird because any bass trapping I've had on the back wall has counterintuitively, to me, made the null worse.
Yeah.
So I've had to remove all bass trapping off the back wall and just have low, mid and high frequency trapping, which is what I have. The corner traps I have, they reduce the null by maybe a dB between all four of them, 2 in either side.
Yeah.
But they really cleaned up the decay time between 100 and 200. But the problem in this room was the 35 to 45.
40 hertz is probably the biggest offence.
Yeah, which was like a second long decay time. It was pretty bad. One way around that is obviously high passing Trinov to 50, but that's no fun. And you have low end resonances everywhere you go, so you want some of it, or I feel like I want some of it to be realistic. So we started off with a bass trap in each corner, and that worked.
It did.
It immediately...
You could hear the 40 hertz drop down a lot.
It
by
sucks the sound into itself, and then all of a sudden the low end feels like it's reducing slightly, which it may be in terms of, it definitely is in terms of resonance, but what it's doing is just clarifying the mid-range, and then the top end just opens up. And
so by removing that low frequency energy, you then unmask the mid-high frequencies. They get completely, people don't realise that just because it's only dealing with that kind of 150 and below, by controlling that, you really open up the mid-range. And the imaging, the sort of sound staging, the depth can improve significantly.
Yeah.
You really do sort of notice that.
And even the resonances at 40 hertz, say, the problems extend up multiple octaves, don't they?
Yeah.
And only when you take that away do you actually hear just how much masking and smearing is going on.
That's right.
And it was remarkable having that just disappear, and you can A/B having them on and off, and you can feel the flabbiness. And it actually made me realise just how long the sustain was. I was seeing it on in RU as up to a second. I think I got it down to 600 milliseconds. Seeing it's one thing, hearing it's another, but then hearing without it, the contrast was just...
Then you really notice it.
Just massive.
Now, one of the most common questions is, can I get away with one? Because there is a financial implication of this. These AVAs are proper money. They're not, you can't do this cheaply, unfortunately. You know, the common question is, can I just put one in a room? The answer generally is no, unless your room is extremely small. In a room of this size, I think the minimum that we've proved is 2, but really it's 3 that's making the big difference.
3 was the magic number.
And it varies in many rooms. It's a question of, and building one at a time, but it's very rarely that one is ever enough, and it's actually quite disappointing. We sadly get a lot of people that try just one and don't think it's doing it for them, but then when they try 2 or 3, the improvement more than doubles. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
It's sort of, they actually sort of interact with each other, but not in a physical sense. They're not talking to each other electronically in any way, but that acoustic coupling of multiple units in a room can improve really quite significantly. So,
what's the most you put in a room?
I've done one room with 8, but it was quite a large space. I mean, pretty big. I mean, a typical 4x3 room, definitely 2 is a very good starting point. Often 3, quite often 4 ultimately, but the 4th one is the icing on the cake. When you start getting into rooms that are 6x10, 8x10, then you definitely start to warrant 4.
Yeah.
The biggest one I've done, which was 8, I think was, wow, I think it was probably like something like 12x18. It was a pretty big space.
That's a big room. Yeah.
It was a cinema room, a cinema room of a very large house. So, but most studios generally is either 2 or 4. Sometimes 3. Sometimes the in a typical studio build in a house, ironically, completely the opposite here. But often when the corner where the door is can often be less effective. The door resonates and actually acts like a bass trap a little bit. If the door is quite thin and not a sort of solid object.
Yeah, that's a solid door, and I've put tech sound on it for whatever.
So that is actually possibly one of the reasons why it's now maintaining that solid structure is building up bass, because the door isn't resonating. Right. Often I see people's spare rooms, the door itself is just the original house door, and that often can act a bit like a resonator. So when money is an issue and they're trying to limit it to 3, then often that door corner is the one that doesn't get one bought for it. So it's
yeah, I mean that door, the door itself and what I've done to it soundproofing wise actually is very effective. I was quite surprised how effective that is. Measuring on the other side. So we tried 1 in each corner, and then we tried 2 on the back wall.
Yeah.
And then we tried just the back 2, just the front 2, but just the back 2 was working better. We tried 1 underneath the desk, and then we tried 2 stacked in the back corner where the door is, because the biggest build-up is the back corner, annoyingly behind the door.
Yeah.
So in terms of logistics, it's going to be
significantly more effective than any other position.
Yeah.
So,
and whether we had those 2 in the back corner and that one in this corner, or 4 with an extra one in the little alcove next to the fireplace, yeah, those positions worked really well. Now there's a weird phenomenon in this room with the Knoll where anything seems to make it worse. So where we optimised the AVVAs there was a little sacrifice on the Knoll, 1 decibel, but then the low end treatment was
significant. I mean, I think we've now got about that 10 dB reduction at 40 hertz, so it really has.
And it's not just the amplitude. I know there'll be people thinking, we'll just set your high pass at 50 or tell Trinov to lower 40 hertz, which it's doing, but that's not actually treating the decay time.
That's right.
All that's doing is processing the EQ, which we can get used to or we can treat with room correction, but it's the decay time that even with all this acoustic paneling, this isn't effective at anywhere near 50 hertz.
That's the point. Below 200 is very challenging, and it takes an active product like this to be able to do it in such a small space. That's the key to this.
Yeah.
If we had the luxury of an 8 metre by 10 metre room, then we wouldn't be so bothered about taking a couple of metres out of the corners, which is the way traditionally most people have done passive bass traps, and they can be very effective.
Yeah.
But that just isn't possible in a typical small home
2
studio.
meters would take us to this line.
We would.
In the
a pair of us wouldn't be able to sit together.
So totally impractical. This is definitely a more practical option.
And you can take them with you. So when you do move house to the next place, you can then just unplug them and walk away with them. And they will be effective every place you ever go to. So.
Yeah. Whereas a fixed tune trap, so tuned to 1 frequency, you need a lot of them. They're not that cheap.
Yeah.
They are quite bulky. They're way bulkier than these.
That AVA sitting in that corner is actually dealing with stuff right out here. It's amazing.
So just as a reminder, this was the decay time we had earlier, and if you want to check out the waterfall, we can see here that there's quite a big mess in the time domain in the low end here. Now with Trinov, that is reduced, but there's still a lot of decay time, as we can see here. Personally, I prefer looking at this on the spectrogram. This just makes more sense. So with Trinov, we can see it's quite a flat frequency response. Now there's not so many, it's a bit more even in terms of the intensity of the frequencies, but we still have this great big resonance in the low end. Admittedly, not as obvious as that, but it's a bit more scattered, but it's still there. This was the result. So you can see there's a huge improvement. If we go from that to that, this is both without Trinov. That's over a second sustain. And that's barely over, barely over 300 milliseconds. So this is a huge reduction. And if we look at the waterfall, there's a huge effect on the time domain here. That's what we had. This is what we have now. That is so audible. You've just got to hear it for yourself. I can't explain it, but it really does clear up the low end, and mixers just sound tight. The intelligibility of everything comes together. It really is impressive. All right, let's get back to Paul in the interview. So what are they, 2,800?
So £2,799 each ink vat.
And I would need three of them.
Three of them. You do the maths.
No, you're right.
You get a bit changed from 9 grand.
So I know a lot of you would be burning to know if I'm going to buy some, and I'm not going to tell you. So there might be another video, there might not be. Yeah. But the result is fascinating. What I was noticing listening to some of my mixes, which I'm mixing at the moment on headphones, is they're actually translating quite well anyway, in terms of there's a tight low end that you can achieve on those. So they're taking the effect of the room out. So it's actually encouraging having this system in, just to hear how things are working and translating. But what they're doing, you've just got to hear it for yourself. I can't. Yeah. I can describe it in terms of it is just sucking everything in. There's a slight sense of it altering the balance of the speakers, maybe, in terms of you're hearing a bit more high end. It's a bit like, with room correction, a lot of people complain, oh, it's just adding brightness. It's not. It's the phase cohesion that it's delivering that makes everything so much clearer, which is perceived as brightness sometimes. Whereas what these are doing is unmurking the low end. Is that a word? Unmurking, it should be. Removing the murkiness. And in, I guess, SPL as well, by default, that there's just less going on in the room. Less sustaining. Yeah. So just clearing everything up, and
that's the key, because if you take the typical example is where you have a bass drum. When we had the AVVAs out, the bass drum basically goes fut and the is the room. That's the decay. So when you take that decay away, then it just goes fut from the speaker, and that's how the kick drum sounds.
Yeah. So that kick drum you had on was kind of a.
Yeah. That's it.
And it was the room. Yeah. And then with the AVVAs on, it's just.
And so it does actually make, I mean, aside of any mixing, in terms of just deciding on a kick drum sample, if you're, it makes a massive difference to your choice of sounds, let alone being able to handle how you believe it actually sounds, both in terms of the murky mids and the low end energy in general.
Oh, and in terms of processing envelopes and transient responses, you're going to get a significantly better idea of what you're dealing with. And if it sounds as tight as you think it does with these on, it's going to sound impeccably tight on other systems, and therefore your mixers will translate. So there is a compelling argument to getting some, Paul.
I know there is.
Thank you for putting a spanner in my works of keeping this studio idea low cost. I had an idea in mind for budget, and there's a temptation to smash that, but we'll see.
To be discussed.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
No worries, mate.
Great to see you. Thanks for showing me those. And I'll leave links in the description. Thanks for watching. It's been emotional. See you on the next one.
Cheers. Bye.